Most of you say you want growth. You don't. You want comfort with better branding. You want success without pressure, respect without sacrifice, dominance without pain. That's fantasy. Mental growth requires discomfort because discomfort is the only force strong enough to break the weak version of you. And right now, the weak version is in control. You think growth feels good? It doesn't. Growth feels like confusion, like pressure, like isolation, like being misunderstood. It feels like you're speaking a different language while everyone around you is still mumbling excuses. That's what speaking in tongues really is. It's not religion, it's transformation. It's the moment your mindset evolves so far beyond your environment that average people literally cannot comprehend you anymore. When a man levels up mentally, he stops communicating in the language of fear. He stops negotiating with laziness. He stops translating his ambition into something small enough for insecure people to digest. He starts speaking in power, in certainty, in discipline. And to the weak, that sounds foreign, aggressive, arrogant, good. It should. Discomfort rewires your identity, not your mood, your identity. There's a difference. Motivation is a temporary spike. Identity is permanent architecture. If you still see yourself as the comfortable guy, the safe guy, the I'll try tomorrow guy, then discomfort will feel like torture. But if you decide you're the man who thrives in pressure, who hunts resistance, who eats hardship for breakfast, then discomfort becomes fuel. Weak men avoid discomfort because it exposes them. It reveals their lack of control, their lack of discipline, their fragile ego. Strong men chase discomfort because it sharpens them. Every brutal workout, every awkward social risk, every lonely night building instead of partying, that's you carving a new identity. That's you burning the old skin. Speaking in tongues is when your actions no longer align with the crowd, when your discipline becomes so extreme that average people call you obsessed, when your standards rise so high that your old friends feel judged just standing next to you. They won't understand your language anymore because you stopped speaking comfort. You started speaking dominance. And here's the truth: most people are too soft to accept. Growth isolates you before it elevates you. When you demand more from yourself, you automatically demand more from your environment. Most people can't handle that. They want you small, predictable, manageable. The moment you change your internal dialogue from can I to I will, you've switched languages. You've stepped into power. Discomfort is the translation process. It's the friction between who you are and who you're becoming. That friction hurts. Good, it's supposed to. Diamonds are created under pressure, not in comfort zones. Steel is forged in fire, not in convenience. And men are built in struggle, not in safety. You say you want mental strength? Then stop trying to feel good all the time. Start trying to get stronger. Those are not the same objective. Strength demands sacrifice. It demands silence when you want to complain, action when you want to hesitate, discipline when you want to indulge. That's how you shift identity. That's how you start speaking in a tongue only killers understand. Control is everything. If you cannot control your urges, your time, your emotions, your environment controls you. And controlled men do not dominate, they obey. Discomfort is how you train control. You wake up early when your body begs for more sleep. You train when you're tired. You focus when you're distracted. You build when you're bored. That repetition under pressure is mental warfare. And you either win it daily or you lose yourself slowly. Most people don't grow because they retreat the second it gets uncomfortable. They interpret discomfort as danger. I interpret it as direction. If it's hard, if it scares you, if it stretches you, that's exactly where you need to go. That's the gateway. That's the door guarded by pain that leads to power. Mental growth requires discomfort because comfort protects your current identity. And your current identity is average. You don't break average by staying safe. You break it by stepping into rooms where you're the least competent, by taking risks that threaten your ego, by holding standards that demand you evolve or collapse. So stop asking for growth if you're not willing to bleed for it mentally. Stop pretending you want power while you worship comfort. You can't have both. The man who dominates his life is the man who voluntarily walks into discomfort and says, "This is where I belong." You want to speak in tongues? Then elevate your thinking so high that the crowd cannot translate you. Build discipline so ruthless that laziness feels like betrayal. Build control so absolute that emotion becomes a tool, not a weakness. Mental growth is not therapy. It's war. War against your excuses. War against your habits. War against the soft voice inside you begging for relief. And relief is the enemy. If you truly want power, then understand this. Discomfort is not something to survive, it's something to master. And once you master it, you become untouchable. You say you want power, but the second it gets uncomfortable, you hesitate. That hesitation is the reason you're still average. Discomfort is not a side effect of growth. It is the price of admission. Every level of strength, every upgrade in status, every shift in identity demands payment. And the currency is pressure. If it feels easy, you're not advancing. You're repeating what you already know. You're operating inside your current limits, and operating inside your limits never expands them. The body doesn't grow without resistance. The mind doesn't sharpen without challenge. The man doesn't evolve without friction. When you avoid discomfort, you are actively choosing to stay the same. Look at your patterns. You avoid difficult conversations. You postpone hard decisions. You escape into entertainment instead of execution. Why? Because discomfort threatens your ego. It exposes gaps in your competence. It forces you to confront uncertainty. Most men would rather protect their pride than build their power. That's the difference. Discomfort is not random suffering. It's targeted refinement. When you step into a situation that tests you, whether it's physical strain, intellectual pressure, financial risk, or social tension, you are forced to adapt. Adaptation is growth. Without it, you stagnate, and stagnation over time turns into weakness. There's a moment right before you do something difficult where your mind looks for an exit. It searches for justification. Tomorrow is better. I'm not ready. Now isn't the right time. That voice isn't wisdom. It's self-preservation. It wants safety. Safety keeps you alive. It does not make you formidable. Every time you override that voice and move forward anyway, you build authority over yourself. That internal authority is real power, not money, not followers, not validation. Control over your own impulses. The ability to act despite discomfort is what separates disciplined men from emotional ones. Pressure clarifies who you are. When you're tired, stressed, and uncertain, your true identity shows. If you collapse under minor resistance, your foundation is weak. If you stay composed and execute regardless of conditions, you're building something solid. Discomfort reveals the cracks. That revelation is a gift, not a threat. Most people interpret discomfort as a signal to stop. High performers interpret it as a signal to lean in. The edge of your comfort zone is the border of your current identity. Cross that border repeatedly, and you become someone new. Stay inside it, and you remain predictable, safe, and replaceable. Understand this clearly. The world does not reward comfort. It rewards value. And value is built to skill, resilience, and composure under pressure. None of those are developed in ease. They are forged when you choose the harder option consistently. The extra hour of work, the disciplined diet, the risk of rejection, the uncomfortable truth spoken directly. When something intimidates you, that's information. It highlights a weakness or a limitation. Instead of retreating, you confront it. You train it. You expose yourself to it until it loses its grip on you. Repeated exposure to discomfort builds immunity to fear. And a man who is not ruled by fear is difficult to control. You don't rise to the level of your ambition. You fall to the level of your training. If your training avoids discomfort, your results will reflect that. If your training embraces it, your capacity expands. This is not motivational theory. It's structural reality. Systems grow stronger under managed stress. Muscles, businesses, reputations, character, same principle. The moment you begin to seek discomfort strategically, your mindset shifts. You stop asking, how can I make this easier? And start asking, how can this make me stronger? That single shift changes everything. Hard tasks become opportunities, pressure becomes practice, resistance becomes a tool. Discomfort is not something to fear or tolerate reluctantly. It is something to pursue deliberately. The man who willingly enters difficult situations with composure and intent is the man who accelerates his own evolution. While others are negotiating with their feelings, he is expanding his limits, and limits, once expanded, rarely shrink. You don't have a motivation problem, you have an identity problem. That's the uncomfortable truth most men avoid. You wait to feel inspired before you act, and then you wonder why your discipline collapses the second that feeling fades. Feelings are unstable. Identity is structural. If you build your life on emotion, it will crack under pressure. If you build it on identity, it holds. Motivation is a spike. It's a surge of energy triggered by a video, a speech, a temporary high. It feels powerful in the moment, but it's unreliable. It depends on environment, mood, sleep, validation. Identity doesn't ask how you feel. Identity dictates what you do. When a man truly sees himself as disciplined, he doesn't negotiate with laziness. When he sees himself as strong, he doesn't debate whether to train. Action becomes a reflection of self-image. Most men still identify as average, even if they claim they want excellence. They say they want wealth, status, control, but deep down, they see themselves as ordinary. And you always act in alignment with how you see yourself. If you believe you are inconsistent, you will behave inconsistently. If you believe you lack willpower, you will prove yourself right. Your behavior defends your identity. The real transformation begins when you stop trying to get motivated and start redefining who you are. That shift is internal and deliberate. It requires brutal honesty. Are you the man who finishes what he starts, or the man who quits quietly? Are you the man who commands respect in a room, or the one who blends into the background? Your current results answer that question clearly. Identity is built through repeated evidence. You cannot declare yourself disciplined and then sleep through your alarm. You cannot claim strength and then avoid discomfort. Every action either reinforces the old identity or constructs a new one. Small decisions compound into self-perception. Wake up early consistently, and you start seeing yourself as controlled. Train through fatigue, and you start seeing yourself as resilient. Speak directly instead of avoiding confrontation, and you start seeing yourself as confident. This is why temporary motivation fails. It tries to change behavior without upgrading identity. That's unstable. The moment the emotion disappears, the behavior collapses because it has no structural support. But when identity shifts first, behavior becomes automatic. You don't force discipline. You express it. There's a moment when a man draws a line internally and decides, this is who I am now. Not for a week, not for a challenge, permanently. That decision is quiet but powerful. From that point forward, he filters choices through identity. Does this align with the man I am becoming? If not, it's eliminated. No drama, no debate. Weak identities require constant external fuel. They need validation, praise, hype. Strong identities are self-sustaining. They operate regardless of applause. That's why high-level performers appear calm. Their actions aren't emotional reactions. They are consistent expressions of who they've decided to be. Your environment will test this shift. People will remind you of your old patterns. They'll expect you to stay the same. They'll reference your past failures. That's where most men collapse. They revert because their identity wasn't solidified. But if you are serious, you hold the line. You behave in alignment with the upgraded version of yourself, even when it feels unfamiliar. It will feel unnatural at first. That's normal. You're replacing old wiring. But repetition builds certainty. The more you act like the disciplined man, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, inconsistency feels foreign. Laziness feels uncomfortable. Weak decisions feel out of character. That's the shift. When the new identity becomes stronger than the old impulses. When discipline is not something you try to apply, but something you naturally embody. When your standards are not goals, but reflections of who you are. Stop chasing motivation. It's unreliable and temporary. Build an identity so solid that your actions no longer depend on emotion. When who you are aligns with what you want, execution stops being a struggle and starts being inevitable. The moment you start elevating your standards, your circle starts shrinking. That's not bad luck. That's mathematics. Growth creates separation. When you think bigger, move sharper, and demand more from yourself, you automatically create distance from those who don't. And most men are not prepared for that distance. You say you want to level up, but you're not prepared for the silence that comes with it. You're not prepared for the subtle resistance, the jokes, the sideways comments, the energy shift when you stop participating in mediocrity. The truth is simple. When you outgrow average thinking, average people feel threatened. Not because you attack them, because your evolution exposes their stagnation. Isolation is not rejection, it is realignment. When you change your priorities, your conversations change. When your conversations change, your relationships change. If your old circle was built around comfort, distraction, and low standards, your growth will disrupt it. You won't relate the same way. You won't tolerate the same behavior. You won't laugh at the same excuses. Most men sabotage their own elevation because they fear being alone. They would rather shrink their ambition than risk social discomfort. They dim their discipline to stay relatable. They mute their goals to avoid tension. That's weakness disguised as loyalty. Loyalty to people who are loyal to comfort. Here's what no one tells you clearly. Growth isolates before it rewards. There's a phase where you are no longer who you used to be, but not yet fully who you're becoming. That in-between space feels uncomfortable. You don't fully connect with your old environment, and you haven't yet built a new one. That space tests your conviction. In that phase, you will question yourself. You'll wonder if you're being extreme, if you're being too intense, if you're losing balance. But ask yourself this: was the old version of you producing the results you claim you want? If not, why protect it? When you begin to demand more from yourself, you also begin to demand more from those around you. Higher standards are contagious, but they are also confrontational. They force others to evaluate their own effort. Many won't rise. They'll retreat. They'll label you obsessive, arrogant, detached. That's predictable. The reality is that environments are built around shared identities. If your identity upgrades, but the environment remains stagnant, tension is inevitable. Either you regress to match it or you outgrow it completely. There is no stable middle ground. High performers understand this. They don't chase acceptance. They chase alignment. They choose proximity to ambition over proximity to familiarity. They understand that temporary loneliness is a fair price for long-term elevation, because eventually the isolation phase ends. As your standards solidify, you attract differently wired individuals, people who operate at your level, who speak your language of discipline and execution. But that only happens if you withstand the transitional isolation without retreating. Most men never reach that point because they fold under social pressure. They mistake comfort for connection. They prioritize belonging over becoming. That decision costs them years. Isolation during growth is proof that your internal shift is real. If nothing around you changes when you claim you're improving or not improving enough, real transformation disrupts patterns. It restructures your schedule. It changes your habits. It redraws your boundaries. This is not about arrogance or cutting people off impulsively. It's about understanding that elevation has consequences. If you become more focused, you will have less time for distraction. If you become more disciplined, you will have less tolerance for chaos. That naturally reduces your compatibility with certain environments. The key is composure. Don't complain about the isolation. Don't dramatize it. Accept it as a phase of construction. Stay locked into your mission. Build your body, build your skills. Build your financial leverage while others are socializing their potential away. You are investing yours. Eventually, results speak. The same people who questioned your intensity will recognize your progress. Some will respect it, some will resent it. Neither reaction should affect you. Your trajectory is not dependent on their comfort. Isolation is not a signal to slow down. It is confirmation that you are separating from the average baseline. And separation is required for dominance. Most men are controlled by their emotions and don't even realize it. They call it being real. They call it following their feelings. In reality, they are reacting to impulses like children and wondering why their lives lack structure. If your emotions dictate your decisions, you are not in control. And if you are not in control, you are not powerful. Your feelings are data, not commands. They signal comfort, fear, fatigue, excitement. But signals are meant to be interpreted, not obeyed blindly. The weak respond instantly. The disciplined pause, assess, and act according to principle. That pause is where control lives. That space between impulse and action is where dominance is built. You wake up tired. Emotion says stay in bed. Discipline says get up. You feel intimidated. Emotion says avoid the situation. Discipline says step forward. You feel bored. Emotion says seek distraction. Discipline says execute anyway. In every one of these moments, a decision is made, and that decision compounds over time into identity. High-level performance is not built on emotional alignment. It's built on behavioral consistency. If you only act when you feel motivated, your output will fluctuate. If you act regardless of mood, your output stabilizes. Stability creates momentum. Momentum creates leverage. Emotions are volatile. They shift with sleep, diet, stress, external validation. If your standards shift with them, you become unstable. Imagine building a business that only operates when the owner feels inspired. Imagine leading a team based on your mood. Imagine training only when energy is high. The result would be chaos. Control means operating on standards, not sensations. You decide in advance who you are and what you do. Then you execute accordingly. The emotional state becomes irrelevant to the action. That is maturity, that is strength. This does not mean suppressing emotion blindly. It means mastering it. Anger can be redirected into fuel. Fear can sharpen awareness. Frustration can intensify focus. But only if you are in command. If anger controls you, you make reckless decisions. If fear controls you, you avoid necessary risks. If frustration controls you, you quit prematurely. Most men have never trained emotional control. They train their bodies. They chase money. They study strategy. But they never develop internal regulation. As a result, they sabotage themselves in critical moments. A single emotional reaction can destroy months of progress. Control is built through exposure and repetition. You deliberately place yourself in uncomfortable situations and practice composure. You hold eye contact under pressure. You speak clearly when nervous. You continue working when frustrated. Each repetition strengthens your ability to remain steady under stress. There's a reason elite operators emphasize calmness. Calm is not passive. It is controlled intensity. It is the ability to execute without internal chaos. When others panic, you analyze. When others complain, you adjust. When others hesitate, you move. Emotional discipline also protects your time. How many hours have been wasted because you weren't in the mood? How many opportunities avoided because you felt uncertain? The cost of emotional indulgence is invisible at first, but over years it compounds into mediocrity. The man who wins consistently is not the most emotional. He is the most regulated. He understands that feelings are temporary, but decisions are permanent. He refuses to let a temporary state dictate a permanent consequence. You must become the type of man whose standards override his impulses. That requires awareness. It requires repetition. It requires deliberate effort. But once built, it becomes a competitive advantage. When your emotions no longer control your schedule, your conversations, your reactions, you become difficult to manipulate. External pressure loses its grip. Provocation doesn't destabilize you. Praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't derail you. At that point, you are operating from command, not reaction. And command is where real power exists. Pressure is the filter that exposes weakness and manufactures strength at the same time. Most men spend their lives trying to avoid it. They want smooth paths, predictable outcomes, minimal resistance. Then they wonder why they remain fragile. You cannot build mental strength and comfort. It's structurally impossible. Strength is a response to demand. No demand, no adaptation. Look at any system that improves muscle, skill, business, reputation. It improves when it is stressed beyond its current capacity and forced to adjust. Remove the stress and progress stops. Add intelligent pressure and growth becomes inevitable. The mind follows the same rule. If you never push it into strain, it never upgrades. Pressure does something comfort never will. It forces clarity. When timelines are tight, when stakes are high, when consequences are real, excuses disappear. You see who you actually are. You see how you respond. Do you freeze? Do you panic? Do you blame? Or do you stabilize, assess, and act? That response pattern is your current mental strength. Most men don't lack potential. They lack exposure to controlled adversity. They live in predictable routines, shielded from meaningful challenge. Then the first real obstacle hits, and they collapse because they never trained for resistance. You don't wait for crisis to test your character. You simulate stress voluntarily. You create high standards. You impose deadlines. You train beyond comfort. You speak up in rooms where your voice shakes. That's deliberate pressure. There is a moment in every demanding situation where your mind searches for relief. It wants escape. It wants reduction. That's the breaking point for the average man. But if you stay composed in that moment, if you continue executing despite the internal discomfort, something shifts. Your tolerance expands. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt intense becomes normal. This is how mental calluses are built. Repeated exposure to difficulty without retreat thickens your psychological resilience. You stop interpreting stress as threat. You begin interpreting it as stimulus. Instead of shrinking, you adapt. High-pressure environments accelerate growth because they eliminate illusion. Under pressure, preparation is exposed. Discipline is revealed. Character becomes visible. You cannot fake composure when the stakes are real. You either have it or you don't. And if you don't, pressure gives you the opportunity to build it. Most people resent pressure because it feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is not damage. It's construction. When you lift heavier weight, the strain feels intense. But that strain triggers adaptation. The same principle applies mentally. When you take on responsibilities that stretch you, when you pursue goals that intimidate you, your brain is forced to expand its capacity. Pressure also sharpens focus. When there is something meaningful at risk, distractions lose their appeal. Urgency eliminates trivial behavior. You prioritize, you streamline, you execute. That sharpening effect is powerful. It trains you to operate with intensity and clarity. Avoiding pressure creates long-term weakness. Seeking it strategically creates long-term advantage. The key word is strategically. Reckless stress without structure leads to burnout. Controlled stress with recovery leads to resilience. You increase the load gradually. You challenge yourself intentionally. You reflect, adjust, and repeat. Every time you survive a demanding situation with composure, your self-trust increases. You start believing in your ability to handle complexity. That belief is not motivational fantasy, it's evidence-based confidence. You've been tested, you've responded, you've grown. Over time, what used to intimidate you becomes baseline. High standards no longer feel extreme. Responsibility no longer feels overwhelming. Pressure no longer feels threatening. It feels normal. And when pressure feels normal to you while others crumble under it, you gain an undeniable advantage. Comfort is seductive. It doesn't attack you. It doesn't look dangerous. It feels safe, reasonable, even deserved. That's why it's powerful. It whispers instead of shouts. It convinces you that you've done enough, that you can slow down, that you can relax a little longer. And while you're negotiating with comfort, time is moving. You think the threat is failure. It's not. The real threat is stagnation disguised as stability. You can survive in comfort for years without obvious consequences. You'll pay your bills. You'll maintain your routine. You'll look functional from the outside. But internally, your edge dulls, your hunger weakens, your standards soften. Comfort lowers your tolerance for difficulty. The more you indulge it, the less capable you become of handling resistance. Small inconveniences start feeling overwhelming. Minor criticism feels personal. Basic discipline feels exhausting. You become fragile without noticing it. That fragility compounds quietly. Most men build their lives around minimizing discomfort. They choose easier paths, easier conversations, easier goals. Then they expect extraordinary results from ordinary inputs. That's irrational. You don't get uncommon outcomes from common effort. You get them from sustained tension. Comfort trains you to seek relief. Growth trains you to seek progress. Those two mindsets cannot coexist. When relief becomes your priority, you structure your life around convenience. When progress becomes your priority, you structure your life around challenge. There is a critical moment every day when comfort presents an option. Stay in bed. Skip the workout. Delay the call. Avoid the confrontation. Choose the cheaper shortcut. In that moment, nothing dramatic happens. No alarm sounds. No immediate penalty appears. That's why it's dangerous. The cost is delayed. Repeated small choices for comfort build a pattern. That pattern becomes identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who postpones, who negotiates, who rationalizes. And once that identity solidifies, ambition becomes theoretical. You talk about what you could do, not what you execute. Comfort also shrinks your vision. When you are comfortable, urgency disappears. You stop pushing boundaries. You stop asking bigger questions. You stop testing your limits. Life becomes maintenance instead of expansion. Maintenance is survival. Expansion is dominance. Look at men who operate at a high level. They intentionally reject excessive comfort. They train hard even when they don't have to. They pursue complex goals when simpler ones would suffice. They enter competitive environments instead of avoiding them. Why? Because they understand that sharpness fades without friction. Comfort tells you that you deserve ease because you worked hard. Discipline tells you that ease is earned temporarily, not installed permanently. There is a difference between recovery and complacency. Recovery prepares you for the next challenge. Complacency convinces you there is no next challenge. If you are honest, you already know where comfort has infiltrated your life. It's in the conversations you avoid, the standards you lowered, the effort you reduced, the risks you postponed. Those areas are not neutral. They are actively shaping your future. The world does not pause because you feel settled. Competition increases. Standards rise. Markets shift. If you remain comfortable while everything around you accelerates, you fall behind. Not because you lack intelligence, but because you chose ease over edge. You must deliberately reintroduce controlled discomfort into your life. Not chaos, not burnout. Strategic challenge. Raise your standards, increase your output, tighten your routines, reclaim intensity. That process restores sharpness. Comfort feels good in the moment. Power feels better in the long term. One gives you temporary relief. The other gives you leverage. The decision between them is daily and repetitive. And the man who consistently chooses challenge over ease separates himself from the average without needing to announce it. Decide who you are. Decide what you tolerate. Decide what you're willing to endure. Then step into the fire without flinching. Because the version of you that commands respect, wealth, and dominance is waiting on the other side of pain. And if you're not willing to go there, then accept being ordinary. But if you are, then stop talking. Embrace the discomfort. Burn the weak identity. And become the man who speaks a language the world has no choice but to respect.